The countdown is on for the changes coming to Kansas City, but the countdown is up for how much money they can spend. What's the new cap today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back in, everybody. News around the league is starting to flow. Things are changing. What's it going to look like? And one big headline today, we're going to break it down for you. Thanks for making this your first listen. Make another Locked On show your next listen. We would appreciate it. All across, you might want to check out the draft or the NFL show or any of the number of bonus episodes we have on a bunch of channels. So make sure you get liked and subscribed here on this channel as well as the rest of the network. We thank you very much for that. It's been a great season, and now we're moving on to the future. We are going to go through everything that needs to happen in the quarterback room. A lot of hubbub about Patrick Mahomes' performance in the Super Bowl. What does that mean? What do you do to support that? What changes are in place? How did he perform this year? That's coming up a little bit later as well. Not exactly the air that you're looking for, but we start with where the league is going, what that means for the situation the Chiefs are in. You can find more on all these topics, especially QB stats, the cap, and everything over at KC Chiefs Corner, Chris's Substack, so make sure you check him out. Get over at mine at NFL33.com and RGR Football, as well as Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. RGR is a lot of places you can get information from us. We appreciate you checking those out. So, with no hubbub, I was a little surprised that projections had come out about the cap, I don't know, a week or two ago. Today, looks like it's going to be somewhere between 277 and 275. A couple of $3 million more than I was expecting by most of the projections that I had seen. And the Chiefs take every cent they can get. But are you surprised that it jumped up a little over $22 million?
Yeah, I'm really surprised it jumped up as much as it did. I was not expecting it to jump $22 million. I was thinking Chiefs had it pegged. And when we were talking about this, when I talked about this on Monday's show, they were just over $1 million in cap space, or under $1 million in cap space at around 274. Right now, over the cap has them with just under 8 million in cap space because they have it pegged at 279 because it's not set yet. It's supposed to be between 277 and 281. So they're taking the average right now. So, I mean, it could be as little as $3 million that they'll have, and it could be as much as maybe 11-ish.
Yeah. That's a pretty good change. When Matt and I were looking at it, was $113K. So it is a very volatile situation as we go through, folks. The official announcement will obviously solidify things, but it gives you a little bit of breathing room here. The Chiefs ate up most of the cap space they had after the Super Bowl with some of their futures contracts, and that just bottoms everything out. Now with this, you get a little bit of negotiation room, it feels like to me. I hope that they use that as part of the process of what I think probably still has to happen, and that's some of the moves that we talked about last week in restructures, et cetera. Does it give them another advantage to have this space right now?
I mean, it gives you the ability to go out and get more of your own guys signed. I mean, that's really the reality, is that you have, the ability to go out and maybe add a couple more guys. Maybe you bring somebody back. Maybe you don't bring somebody back, and maybe you make some adjustments with, I would imagine what we know is where they think it's going to be, but the teams have a much better idea of like exactly what it's going to be. So they can kind of figure out exactly what it is that they have to plan and go with. And I'm sure the Chiefs are doing scenarios with all of that. So I would imagine that they will have a pretty good plan in place probably in the next week. Now that the salary cap information is pretty much hammered down at this point.
Knock on wood. I think there's still a number of things that have to be put in place, but it's all about those dollars and how you can move around the cap. Yes, contract extensions, restructures, et cetera, will play a part in here. But right now, you're just trying to get to the point where you're not in a state of flux constantly. I think the futures contracts in particular are always something we forget about because they're not high dollar, but they do eat into what the total cap is. This little breath of fresh air is both surprising and definitely needed. I don't think that it helps them beyond this year or honestly this month right now, because when I look forward, there's still around 80 for 2026 in cap space, et cetera, and that will probably see another jump at that point. And it isn't until 2027 that they actually feel like they have some room to maneuver in terms of free agency to me.
So if I go look at the total salary cap across the NFL based on what over the cap has, Chiefs have the 9th least amount of cap space in the NFL. So to give you an idea of where the rest of the teams sit, Kansas City is very, very far down there. There are 5 teams that are currently over the salary cap, even with the adjustments that have been made. And like we talked about with the Saints, they have 47 million over the cap. And a big one for Chiefs fans out there. Bills are 10 million over the cap, even with this additional space. So that's going to have to be something that they're going to have to adjust. And I do think that that's going to play into how things are going to be competitive going forward in the NFL.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. We're going to see some interesting moves on some of those franchises, even the Falcons with the Cousins situation, because without the cap space to maneuver, you don't have anything you can do. You have to make sure that on any day of compliance, even if you're working some crazy deal for a tagged player or something like that, you still have to have that space. There's a process to it. And a lot of folks have been asking me about trades lately. And it's not just the draft capital that becomes problematic in some of these high dollar trades, especially for experienced players, but it's the dollars to make room for their existing contracts, unless you pre-negotiate some kind of extension or tear up that you can get one executed right after the other in order to preserve that space.
Well, and it also depends. I mean, when you look at the specific player, like for just as a quick example, Myles Garrett, most people would say there's no way Kansas City could afford him. Well, technically speaking, they could. If he's willing to play under his old contract, he's only got a cap number of, I think $5 million in 2025 and maybe $10 million in 2026, because most of that is voided cap space that will stay with the Browns and salary or signing bonus proration. So he doesn't really have a ton of money that's left on his contract. So is it possible that they could make a trade like that? Yes, it is possible. They have the money to be able to do something like that. But that's really the big key when it comes to trades is the signing bonus and anything that's already been paid sticks with the original team. So if you have a contract where you've signed somebody with a $20 million signing bonus and they've got 3 years left on that, they have $12 million left on their signing bonus. If you trade them, that all comes due immediately. So that is going to be something that will take off the amount that the other team will pay them. And so that could work in Kansas City's favor. It just really depends on where somebody is in their contract and how it all fits.
I think the best route to go here at this time of year for the Kansas City Chiefs is to wait to see who gets cut and see who's a free agent. Yes, sometimes it can get to a bidding war, but man, that draft capital is a number one right now. We're going to talk about some of that coming up here tomorrow, so don't miss that discussion as well. But we have to get to where Patrick Mahomes is, not just how this season ended, but how this season went. Where is he in the air coming up next? This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting, wondering, and worrying if you were going to get that money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying even more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert gives you their taxes their undivided attention as they work through your return so you can get real-time updates on their progress and you can focus on your day. An expert will find you every deduction possible from every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All you have to do is do that to get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, wondering, or worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available for TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Passing is what you have to do in this league. As much as I want to run the ball, nobody wants to listen to me, and that's okay. Ask Andy. It will come back, and it will haunt you. So when you break down how you pass the ball, there are a few places you can get better information than the stats that Chris has over at KC Chiefs Corner, so make sure you check him out. One thing stands out to you maybe overall. What stat is it about Mahomes' season?
Well, and I think that this is something that has been going on with Mahomes for the past couple of years, but it's basically air yards per attempt. And he was third lowest at the NFL in 2024 at 4.2 air yards per attempt. That is very low. The only two quarterbacks lower than him are Tua Tagovailoa and Deshaun Watson.
That says a lot. And just consequently, that makes me feel for Tyreek, to tell you the truth. But that's okay. It's, I think, a product not only of what we saw in the receiver core last year, then with the problems with the offensive line this year, but I think there's more to it than that. What would you say is the primary cause, or what do you think needs to be looked at first and foremost to try to get that corrected?
I think the big thing is they looked at how they were getting played on defense. I mean, they went to mostly getting double, 2 high sets with safeties over the top. So at that point, they decided that they were going to just go shorter and try to spread the field horizontally more than vertically. And I do think that can work, but you have to have the downfield passing game. And we finally saw Mahomes and Worthy actually have a great connection in the Super Bowl, which was encouraging, even though pretty much the rest of the game wasn't. But I think that they're going to have to get that figured out, and they're going to have to address it this season. It'll be really interesting because Worthy basically became what Rasheed Rice was in the second part of last year, towards the end of the season, as he was taking over that role because they needed it in the offense. And then when Brown came back, Worthy was able to be more of the guy that was going to be going over the top and doing deep routes. So with Rice back next year and potentially, Worthy coming back and doing whatever he can, I would think that you're going to see more deep balls. But the reality is that the other question that's going to play into this is how does what happens with Travis Kelce affect this? Because Travis Kelce is also generally, I'm not going to call him a short target, but he is shorter more than he's been down the field lately. So I do think that also could play into it. If he retires after this season, is it possible that is going to make it to where they're trying to go down the field a little bit further because Kelsey's not going to be one of the guys on the field that he's trying to throw to?
It very well could be, and that was my reaction as well. Like, because they've been using him as this double magnet to try to take underneath coverage away, they've kept him on a short leash. To be honest, you haven't seen those deep overs or any kind of like across the middle at depth type routes that we've seen him be really, really effective at the last few years, or prior to the last few years, I should say. So I do think that the offense would shift if we don't see Travis Kelce back next season. But if he is, I think there's also another solution in trying to make sure that you can get the ball to where it needs to be. And that is running an offense that is more adept at taking what's there. They have plays. You can beat any coverage in this league. You have enough athleticism on this team, even without Hollywood Brown, who's right now not signed to a contract, just with Rasheed Rice and Xavier Worthy, that you can attack any coverage they're going to throw out, even too high, quarters, 6, whatever you're looking at, you can attack that. They haven't been able to because of the protection that needs a little bit more time. So how do you combat that? You have to evolve how you align and deploy your resources and your targets in order to make sure that you are not just single-threaded about how you're going to attack a team in a single game. And I think that's something that a step back from the Super Bowl and everything else, that the game planning has to evolve a little bit more as well and not hone quite so in on one thing a team does, because when they change their stripes, it catches you out of position.
Yeah, and I do think that they're going to have to look at adjusting, and it's really going to depend on what they do in free agency and the draft. I mean, that's part of what it's going to play into. And the question that you're going to have to answer, and we don't have the answer right now because we don't know their draft plans, we don't know their free agency plans, is what do you want to be as an offense? Because at this point, if Travis Kelce comes back, you're kind of stuck with a similar offense to what you've had in the past. You can adjust it and you can make changes to it, sure, but it's still going to run through him for the most part. If he doesn't come back, then you're pretty much scrapping everything that you've been doing for the past couple of years because it's all run through Travis Kelce. And then you have to decide, how are you going to function going forward? How are you going to use Patrick's skill set? How are you going to use Rasheed Rice? How are you going to use Xavier Worthy? How are you going to use anybody that you go out and draft? The reality is they don't have a ton of talent at the wide receiver position right now on the roster because you have Xavier Worthy and you have Rasheed Rice. That's pretty much it. You have Nico Remigio down lower, but you don't really have wide receivers at this point. You're going to have to restock that position, and maybe bringing in a free agent is something that they're going to be doing. I don't think that they're going to go spend a ton of money, but it wouldn't shock me if they make some kind of move to get a free agent wide receiver, whether it's Hollywood Brown or somebody similar, and maybe even a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. But they just don't have a wide receiver group that you have to be concerned with right now.
And so that brings you back to the group that is already at tight end. and somebody that I think that they can add to. I'm looking at the free agent list for the tight ends, and it's I won't say that it's a barren landscape, but it's not anybody that makes me want to go, okay, they should add him to this particular offense, and things will change, and you'll have another option. They've tried the Irv Smith thing. They've tried a number, to tell you the truth. And with Hendershot being a restricted free agent, I expect him back. They already went and signed Baylor Cup to a futures age contract. I think they have a couple of places in there, but would you want them to go away from the Travis model and go to more of a double H type role or something, somebody to pair with Noah Gray that's more or less inline and more versatile?
I don't think that they have to necessarily go away from the Travis Kelce role, but you're going to have to find somebody that fits it, and they don't have that person right now. And you're more than likely not going to be able to find that in free agency, so you're going to have to look in the draft. And if you're going to go out and try to get somebody to replace Travis Kelce, unfortunately, the reality is the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you draft him probably in the top 100. And you don't have a ton of picks this year because you've traded some away, and that's fine. I understand why they did it, and it made sense why they did it. But you have to figure out how you're going to attack it going forward, and you have to decide, okay, are we retooling? And let's go back. I want to shift for just a second. Let's go back to the Super Bowl they played against Tampa Bay. It took them 2 years to get back to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. They didn't go back the first year. So it's possible that they're looking at this and saying, there's only so much we can do this year. And I'm not going to say that they're going to come out and say that they're not going to try to get back to the Super Bowl. Obviously they will. But my point is that you can only do so much on the roster. If Travis retires, that changes things even further. If he doesn't retire, obviously, I don't know how many more seasons he's going to play. He could play several, but they have to figure out an answer beyond him. So the question becomes, what do you want to do? How do you want to evolve the offense? You're going to have to address the tackle position. And depending on what you do with Trey Smith and Joe Thuney, you may end up having to address a guard position as well. And you're talking about having all of that you have to do in one offseason to get ready for a chance at competing in 2025.
And then that's the tallest order is how much you have to do right now. One thing that they have to always take care of is the room that supports Patrick Mahomes. What does that look like? And does it need an overhaul? That's coming up next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get into it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place your live bets throughout the game, start to finish. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can get there. You can stay in the action. And if you want to go looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlay. You got to love that because it's a new aspect. You can just roll it into it. If you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking up a player who just hit a three and you think he's getting really, really hot, you can do that in the app, and it makes it super easy. Right now, our new FanDuel customers are getting $150 in bonus bets if you first get a $5 bet that wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the NBA. Make sure you like, sub, hit that bell so you're with us for the offseason because we are 5 days a week plus all year long, and we are going to be shifting and having all kinds of draft content as we get closer. Combine's not very far away, so the athletic matrix will become very, very important very quick, so make sure you're subscribed here. Overhauling this roster is maybe something that can only be applied to certain position rooms. I'm not going to call this a rebuild. They do have some gaps to fill, but I don't think it's to that point. So when we take a look room by room here, quarterbacks are on the table today, and that's because Patrick Mahomes was not able to function as well as he needed to in that Super Bowl. I'm not sure that that's a function of the preparation that he had because the Chiefs went out and as soon as they were able to give a quarterback contract to Chris Oladokun again, because that seems to be an indication that they're happy with the performance, the room that's supporting Patrick, and they're going to continue to do that. But that's just one out of three or four that should go to camp with him. Where do you think the next move has to happen for that room?
Well, and I do think that when you start looking at the Chiefs QB room, it's just a matter of, are they going to bring back Carson Wentz or not? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He's a free agent. I'm sure that they probably want him back. Luckily for them that they didn't really have anything that stood out, and he didn't have a standout performance. So it's possible that maybe they could bring him back with a very limited contract in 2025. They only paid him $2.5 million in 2024. So if they could get him for around that same value in 2025, it wouldn't shock me that they would bring him back. If he's asking for more, I don't know. It's hard because they're already up against the salary cap. That's going to be an issue all season. They have to make decisions as to where they're going to go. But I don't think he showed anything this season that made me think that he has the ability to go and start somewhere else. And that was the big key. If he had if he stepped in a game, played well, and showed that he can still play in the NFL, maybe they don't have a chance to re-sign him. Right now, I don't think anybody's going to be breaking down his door trying to get him in their building for free agency. So I don't even know that this is a deal that we get done until June, somewhere in there. Maybe even after the draft. I mean, they could wait until after the draft and see, is there a QB that falls to them that they really like that they could bring in and have as a cheap backup for the next couple of years.
They certainly could. And it is a spot that I find very intriguing. They've always wanted a veteran as the backup. Always. Since the day that Patrick Mahomes got here. Would they go away from that in an effort to curtail just how tight this cap is for them in order to try to make some of these moves? It's not a huge amount of money, like you said, but it is something that they could make up a little bit of space and maybe allow them to get something else done.
Well, and the other thing that you could look at is not necessarily even considering maybe a Carson Wentz type. Maybe you go out and find a veteran that you can have on the practice squad, and he's able to come in and do what you want that Carson Wentz did, and you can go that route. And then you could have a young guy that is your number two and could start if something happened to Patrick, or would step in and play if something happened to Patrick during a game. I don't know that they'll go that route. You're probably right. They probably will go with a veteran. That's generally how Andy has worked. But at some point, is that going to change? Because it's not like Mahomes is a rookie. I mean, he's now going to be 30 years old heading into this season when, in October during this next season. So it's not like he needs, a vet to kind of tell him how things are going and how to do things. He has that knowledge himself. So it's a question of, do they want that knowledge, and is that what they want behind him?
Yeah.
I would expect that that's the case, but with cost, it's always a question.
It always is. And if you are going to go away from that, to get somebody that's kind of that tweener, right? Somebody that has experience, but isn't maybe a top flight quarterback, or hasn't been at one point. Somebody like Jacoby Brissett or Justin Fields, or, do you go through a Jameis era, that kind of thing?
Jameis wanted to come here.
Yeah, right.
He said it.
And certainly at times he is able to get some things done in an offense that I think has enough overlap to maybe get something done. One guy it won't be is Andy Dalton. Looks like he's going back. So, okay, good for him. I wasn't going to go beating down his door either. But I think the key thing to remember is if something prevents Patrick Mahomes from finishing a season, you cannot count on having someone that steps into the role to play the same way. So for me, it might as well be a more mobile quarterback like Fields or Winston. I would go younger, honestly. Trey Lance is out there. If you want to take a shot, bring somebody into camp to try out. Why not Trey Lance, right? Maybe he's finally learned something because he didn't have a chance to be prepared for when he was drafted, and he's been on two teams at this point. Could be worth a look.
Yeah, and you look at what Andy's been able to do with quarterbacks, and I'm not going to call him a QB whisperer or a QB guru, but he is very good with quarterbacks. Yeah. I do think that he's been very successful. Look at what he did with Donovan McNabb in Philadelphia. Obviously, he was doing much better with Alex Smith than Alex Smith had been able to do anywhere else. And obviously, you see what happens with Patrick Mahomes. So, does it make sense to go out and get a guy that had a ton of talent and was drafted for a reason at number 3 overall? It's not that he didn't have talent. And obviously talent doesn't mean everything because he's not been successful in the NFL, but is it worth the risk if you can get him for a cheap deal? I would think so. Even if he's not going to be somebody that you would end up having on your roster and would make the roster for opening day, bring him in, have him in for a competition, see if you can get anything out of him and get him going in the right direction. If you can't, you cut him. It's not a big deal. He's not going to get a big contract. He hasn't shown anything in the NFL to deserve a big contract.
I have trouble seeing them going with a fresh quarterback, somebody in the draft or the free agents, undrafted free agents. But certainly there are going to be options. There could even be cuts from teams right now that have mediocre quarterbacks that they want to move on from. There's trouble brewing in the quarterback market inside the NFL, and that could lead to something that the Chiefs might be able to take advantage of. So we will see how they come through with that. We will also see, starting tomorrow, what are the legitimate options for the left tackle spot. We'll talk about that. We're going to play a game, get to another variation of the thing that we do. I'm going to call it hot and cold, about maybe some of the names that we like or don't like in a position. It's going to be a fun Friday episode, so make sure that you don't miss it. We hope that you guys are ready and having a good time getting into the off-season flow of things. Start thinking about who could look good in a Chiefs uniform. We're going to have a lot for you. Make sure you like and sub and join us here. We appreciate you making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next one. We will talk to you tomorrow and make sure that we bring it all off-season long. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you then.